Hello, hello. And people are starting to show up. Hi, everybody. Hi, welcome to Geek Speaks Greek. I'm your geek, George O'Connor. Not speaking Greek clearly, speaking English, but I'm using English to speak about Greek mythology. If you've never joined us before, Geek Speaks Greek is a thrice weekly live cast where I talk about a different personage from Greek mythology, be they goddess, god, hero, or monster. Doesn't matter. I cover it all. This week has been a monster week. I felt like it had been too long since we had last drawn a monster. I was feeling kind of like, want to draw some monsters. So on Monday we did, I don't remember. Somebody will remind me. And Wednesday we did Cerberus. And then today we're doing Echidna, the mother of all monsters, which is a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's kind of close enough for our sakes. So I'm just going to talk a few more seconds, just give people a chance to show up. If you've never been here before, one of the greatest things about Geek Speaks Greek is the fact that you, the listeners, or watchers, I suppose, viewers, fans, whatever, geeks. How about geeks? Greek geeks. Send me amazing and incredible artwork each week, each episode. And what I was hoping I could do now is share some of this terrific artwork with all of you. So here I go. Here is my handy dandy iPad. This first one is by Elia, and this was inspired by Wednesday's episode on Cerberus, and it was called Hades Training Spot. It's a little bit backwards, so I'll just tell you he's standing up on a giant ladder holding what must be like the thigh bone of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and he's saying, "Roll over, good boy," which is great. And the fact it's called Spot, if you missed that episode, turns out Cerberus is ancient Greek, or there's some arguments over this. Some people think it means death demon of the deep, which is like, of the dark, which is like, whoa, pretty extreme. But it probably means spotted. So Hades named his dog Spot. So I love that. Elia, that's hilarious. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, so let me give a little apology. I gave credit. There's these two best friends who write in, Liam and Jake. But I actually mistook Liam for his mother. His mother did the actual sending. So I said it was Sarah and Jake were best friends. So Liam sent another picture today to set it straight. And this is a picture of Liam drew of the Sphinx and Oedipus. Look how great that is. So this is not Sarah. This is Liam. I want to give credit where it is. Let me see if I can read what it says. Handwriting's a little bit messy. Sphinx, how you doing? Easy. It's, guess he's trying to think of what the riddle is. The famous riddle of the Sphinx, of course. The Sphinx, asks you questions, and if you don't answer them, she eats you real bad. Eats you bad? What does that mean? I guess pieces fall out everywhere, like the way Cookie Monster eats. If you watch Cookie Monster eat a cookie, no cookie's ever actually going down his throat. It's all just cookies on the side. This next one is from Jamie. Jamie drew a picture of Athena and her owl. She also did that clever trick a bunch of you have come on to recently of writing the name backwards, which I'm so impressed by. Look at this great Athena. That's just perfect. I love the way her skirt's kind of coming over and dramatically billowing over her feet, and it looks like she's kind of rising out of the ground that way. Jamie, you're very, very good. Thank you so much for sending that in. Let's see what else we got. Oh, we were just talking about Jake. Best friend, not of Sarah, but of Liam. Jake drew the Chimera. It's a different version than... when I draw the Chimera, I actually do an unusual Chimera that it's only got like one head, just the lion head and such. This is like a more traditional display where you can see there's the goat head, which breathes fire, the lion head out of the middle of the back though, because normally it's the goat head that comes in the middle of the back. And then there's the snake head at the back. And look at it's the fire is almost being shot like a laser beam or like a flamethrower. This is pretty awesome. So thank you so much for sharing that. Got a couple of monster draws here with monster drawers. I said that so New Yorky with Liam and Jake. Thank you guys both for sending in your stuff. Next up, this one's a little bit sideways, but I think I can still make it work. We have from Moira. We're gonna hold it at an angle because I didn't fix this in advance. She drew a Cerberus, and there's that's Orthus, the two-headed dog brother of Cerberus, who is just never going to live up to his brother, because your brother's got 3 heads, why you only got 2 heads? And he's weeping, if you look right back there. And over here, I'm assuming this is Persephone, and she's saying good boy, because, when you have a 3-headed dog that's as faithful as Cerberus, you're going to want to call him a good boy. Moira, that is terrific. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the touch of the crying Orthos in the background. Poor Orthos. We were talking about that in that episode, how, it's apparently a thing in that family to have multiple heads, and Orthos, he just barely made it. He's got 2 heads. If you recall, Hesiod originally says Cerberus has 50 heads. I don't know if I mentioned this. I kind of thought about that. He also says Cerberus has a mane of snakes, so I think he's got, 3 big heads, and he's counting the mane of snakes. I don't know, because what looks silly? A dog with 50 heads. 50 dog heads, that looks ridiculous. It looks like a hecatonchire, which also looks kind of silly. Let's see. This one's from Aidi, and this one is pretty awesome. He drew Argos Panoptix. And what's really cool about this is Argus is going to be coming up a lot today. I don't know if Edie has the ability to look into the future or just made an educated guess, but look at this great Argus. Argus, by the way, in case you don't know, Argos Panoptix was a giant who had 100 eyes all over his body, every surface. And no more than 50 of those eyes would ever sleep at a time. So as good as a watchdog as Cerberus is, I guess sometimes Cerberus goes to sleep, Argus, well, he's not a dog, but he is a guardian. He's a watcher. He's a guardsman. That's the word I was looking for. He never sleeps because he's always got a couple eyes, at least 50 eyes open. So, pretty cool. Oop. Today, I want to save this one for last because I have something funny to tie into this. Let's go to Yehi. Now, Yehi sent a whole bunch of stuff. And Yehi also has gotten to the point she's reversing her stuff. And this is a guide of how to get to the Underworld. First off, look at that great picture. There's just a shade. There's the looming giant figures of Hades and Persephone and Cerberus. Look at that one face of Cerberus. That's terrifying. And it's all the different ways you could get there. The easy way, no, I'm not resurrecting this person. That's... Now, if you get that, that's a reference to Asclepius, who was made to resurrect the son of Theseus, and he paid for it by getting blown up. But here he's not doing it. The easiest way to get to the Underworld, is to die. We're all going to do it eventually. Not to be dark, but, come on. The uneasy way, this is a little bit of the Orpheus way. You go down there, and you use your music, and you charm your way in, you come out, and you get your dead wife, and you bring her up to the surface, you look around the last second, it's all bad. And then... the blasphemous epic way. You cut your kid up and serve him as soup to the gods. Which, that's a reference to Tantalus. If you want to see that story play out, and I don't show the really cutting. That's that, you can see that in my book, Hades. That's a really funny comic, Yehi. He's so good with color. Look at this portrait of just Persephone. With, giant heads of Cerberus in the background, but Persephone is kind of I love that purple on her face, the shadow. Just everything about this drawing is so beautiful. And then, because she does so much stuff, this is a comic about, remember we talked about the idea of somebody asked, I don't remember who, we were talking about the golden apple and hey, how come Artemis didn't go for it? Aphrodite did, Athena did, Hera did, why didn't Artemis? And just, that's because Artemis doesn't really care. And so she's going off and, actually, I'm not, who is that? I think that's Callisto, the nymph. Maybe he's just grabbing the apple because Artemis is come on, let's go running off. Who cares? I don't care about apples. Who cares? It's the most beautiful. I want to go run through the wilds, wild and free. And then there's another comic where we see how Artemis is using the hair on back of her head, the little moon crescent to cut down an apple. Note, not a golden apple. And then there's one more. Now this one is pretty funny. This is the moment, a little backstory. After Hephaestus was thrown off Mount Olympus for the second time, he made kind of a little fortress for himself on the island of Lemnos. And he wouldn't come back up, and if you remember, that's when Hera got stuck on the throne, the flying throne that held her upside down, and nobody could figure out how to get her off, and Ares is oh, I'll get her. get him. Because Ares is super mad because this is after Ares got trapped, with Aphrodite by the invisible net. So he goes to Lemnos to beat up his brother and drag him back to Mount Olympus to free their mom from the throne his brother's stuck on. There's a lot of backstory for this one. So here we see Ares getting ready, and then we have this kind of flashback where Athena, using her wisdom and her wit, is telling him, oh yeah, if you ever for some reason get in a fight with fire, like if you're ever fighting fire, she tells him, and this is wrong, she goes, it's much hotter on the outside. What you should do is you should rush into the middle and fight the middle because it's going to be hotter on the outside. And he's like, yeah, of course I know that. She's like, oh, I knew you knew that. It's not true. So then there's a really funny bit where we see, the guys that hang out all the time, Apollo, Hermes, and Aphrodite, and Athena are watching the fight on Lemnos. I also love Hermes has just invented binoculars. They're like, what are those things? He's like, I don't know, I'll name them later. Yeah, he just invented binoculars. They're watching, and he's like, oh, this is going really poorly for Ares. And they're like, they ask Athena if she wants to see. She's like, I pretty much know what's happening. I love this whole comic, like the idea that Athena kind of set him up for like disaster. I mean, she didn't need to, but that's even funnier. The fact he's fighting his brother Hephaestus, who is basically a ball of lava, and he, rather than like running away, he's like, it's safer to punch in deeper. So, if you want to see how that fight really plays out, it's in my book, Hephaestus. Now, we have one last comic to show. This one is from Megan, and it's just a kind of cute little one panel of all the gods and goddesses of Olympus roasting marshmallows on Hestia. It's not actually all the gods, but there's Hermes and his pet turtle George. There's Athena and her pet turtle, her pet owl. It's not Archimedes, is it? It is Archimedes. I forgot. There's Hera. There's Zeus. There's Artemis and Apollo. There's Dionysus. They're all kind of experienced. Look how grumpy she is. And what I thought was really fun about this, what I really enjoyed about this piece, is I feel like there was a bit of like a weird mental connection here. I am going to show you all a piece of artwork I drew the other day for Dionysus. This is an actual page. Nobody else has seen this yet, not even my girlfriend. Look how similar this one panel is here in the middle. We see all the gods and goddesses of Mount Olympus. They're all, in this one, they're not roasting marshmallows off her. They're fighting, or they're like Athena's causing trouble with Poseidon, and Apollo's singing a song, and you can see that Artemis is totally annoyed by it. These two are fighting, because of course they are. Hephaestus is actually seeming to be getting along pretty good with his wife for a change, so Ares is all grumpy, and he's crushing the edge of her throne. And back here, you can just see Demeter fighting with Persephone, and then Hades is kind of like, I'm not going to say anything because I don't really have anything to win in this situation, but look closely at her face. Poor Hestia is just like, Now look at this one that Megan drew. Isn't that weird? There's no way Megan could have seen this. I'm going to hold them up simultaneously. Look how similar these are. It's very odd. I think Megan's got The Shining. By the way, for whatever reason, Megan's not able to make an Instagram, or she does have an Instagram, but she's not able to post to it. I think because she doesn't have it on her phone, and Instagram doesn't, you have to have it on the phone. She asked the people if they want to see more of her stuff, because I was saying Megan does these great comics. I want people to be able to read them. You should go find her on Facebook, where her name is Megan Stamdivine. Maybe if Megan's watching, she could put it in the comments too. Also, I'm just going to throw in some, check out CVQ Llama, has a great Instagram where he puts up a lot of comics. And of course, Yehi is Dora Soul 09. So many great comics, so many great drawings. So I hope you guys all take a chance to check out what some of the people are doing. And if you are someone who is putting up your stuff and watches the show and has your own Facebook or Instagram is easier, I guess, because we're all here on Instagram, let me know and I'll give it a little bit of a push here. And while we're talking about that, if you have any artwork that you want to share with me, please send it to my email at georgeo'connorbooks@gmail.com. Wait for a second. And if you want to catch an old episode that you missed, or watch an episode again, or just kind of go through and see all the weird stuff up there, there's my YouTube channel, youtube.com/user/GeorgeLympians. Okay, got all that stuff out of the way. And I'm only beginning to sweat now, so it's not as bad as usual. Normally by this point, I'm already just sweat monster. So hi, today we're actually going to be talking about one of my favorite character designs I've ever come up with for Olympians. And the reason we're doing this, honestly, this character, she's very important to mythology. She doesn't appear in a lot of stories. I'm basically doing this episode because I want to like show off some of these drawings I did of her. I thought it was pretty cool. I've mentioned this before, when I'm drawing an Olympians book, I probably when I'm designing characters for it, I draw each character, I'd say at least 100 times before they get in the book. And sometimes I want to put the character in more, and I end up only drawing them. Like in the case of this character, Echidna, she literally appears in 2 panels of Hermes. Do I have Hermes in front of me? I probably don't. That's it. And I spent in my sketchbooks, I've probably drawn her 300 times. But in my book, she appears twice, and in those, like, just little tiny panels. Like, somebody actually even wrote to me today, like, does she actually appear in any of your books? I'm like, yeah, you probably wouldn't notice. So, let's talk about Echidna, okay? Echidna is often referred to in Greek mythology as the mother of all monsters, which, like I said up front, is a little bit of a reckless exaggeration. She is not the mother of all monsters, but man, she is the mother of a lot of them. But before we get into that, let's talk about her parents. So, I've often complained about how I think there's too many sea gods in Greek mythology. It's like, can't we just have Poseidon and before him Oceanus? Doesn't that make it more simple? But I get it. I get why. There's so many aspects to the sea, and the Greeks were a seafaring people. There were some people who spent their entire lives on the sea, virtually. So there's so many different things, just like how we have so many gods that deal with, if you think about it, the land. Why not have a zillion dealing with the sea? So her 2 parents, at least according to Hesiod, and you know me and Hesiod, are 2 characters I don't think we've really mentioned here yet. So this is a new group of sea gods. Her dad is Phorcys. And he was, if we're trying to find the aspect of the sea that he represents, he kind of comes before Pontus. No, I think he comes after Pontus and after Oceanus, but before Poseidon. But he's more specifically, he's like the god of like the dangers of the sea. Like monsters, kind of, right? That makes sense. Like, like you're swimming in the water, you're swimming, something brushes against your foot, you're like, oh, that doesn't feel good. Like, that's Phorcys. And then her mom was actually Phorcys and her mom are their siblings, which is like, that happens in Greek mythology. Her mom was named Ceto. Now, Ceto sounds a lot like, oh, that's who we did on Monday. Ceto sounds a lot like who we did on Monday, Cetus. If you remember, Cetus meant like whale. Ceto also means whale. So she was literally the goddess of whales. So, and not the country or the portion of the country. Like whales, like the giant cetaceans, The creatures, the mammals, the giant mammals look like fish. So Phorcys and Ceto were the parents of Echidna. And Echidna, so she kind of, you'd think she's like a sea monster. She's kind of not. If she's related to anything, like if there's some aspect of her that her name, I should mention this, Echidna means either like she-serpent or perhaps poisonous serpent. She's very closely with a snake. And she's kind of associated with like, not salt water, but maybe brackish water. Do you know what that is? Brackish water is like kind of like the water that you get in a swamp that's kind of seawater, but kind of fresh water and just kind of gross and sits there and muddy. She's also associated a lot with decay. And in fact, sometimes she's even confused with Python. You know, Python, famously the giant snake, the primordial snake that Apollo kills, kind of famously shooting him full of 100 arrows, and she turns into slime that he has to burn away. She's very much pollution. Yeah, like Echidna is like dirty water, rotting, gross, right? And it's funny to talk about giant monsters this way, but Echidna marries, I don't know, I have to come up with a better term than that. I don't think monsters have marriage ceremonies, but her husband is Typhon. I feel like I've spoken about Typhon a lot, and I haven't done an actual Typhon episode, and I'm like, man, we have to do a Typhon episode. Typhon's literally my favorite monster of Greek mythology. But the 2 of them are a couple, and they have a whole bunch of kids. We talked about a lot of this on Wednesday. Cerberus, very famously one of their kids. The Hydra, the Lernaean Hydra, which fights Heracles, one of their kids. The Nemean lion is often considered one of their kids, who also fights Heracles. Orthos, we mentioned Orthos, the only two-headed dog. Loser, you got 3 heads, I got 2 heads. He's one of their kids. I'm forgetting, there's someone else with a lot of heads that they... Oh, the Chimera. We just saw pictures of that awesome picture by, I think it was Jake? Like, another 3-headed thing. There's this kind of tendency in their kids to have multiple heads. Not the Nemean lion, not Ladon, who was the dragon that guards the apples of the Hesperides, not the Sphinx, who we also saw a great picture of, but, like, all these monsters, so many monsters, like, just come from Echidna. And this is a lot of this is according to Hesiod. This is one of the few instances, I mention Hesiod all the time. You should all read the Theogony. It's awesome. But some of the stuff that Hesiod says about her is a little weird. Like, some of, like, the parentage stuff. In fact, I think Hesiod maybe has different parents for her. Because sometimes people say she's the kid of Gaia and Tartarus, which kind of makes sense to me, too. No, that's Apollodorus who says that. So, the description we get of her, again, from Hesiod, is he describes her as half snake, half beautiful nymph. And here's Sparks Flies. Wait, you haven't done Typhon? I know. I feel like maybe I did a little bit of Typhon in the very first episodes. We got to do a full episode on Typhon. Echidna, half snake, half beautiful woman, half nymph. Now, this is where my design for her I was very excited about. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time drawing than I usually do because... I'll be honest, there's not a lot of stuff to say about her. Once we get past her family and like one other myth, Echidna is a character who kind of, despite having this really important role in creating most of the monsters that you end up seeing in Greek mythology, at least the really big, cool name monsters, like she doesn't really step onto the main stage that often. But that idea of her being half beautiful woman, half snake was very intriguing to me. So I spent a lot of time designing this, and I'm going to first draw you the version. And there's actually, you saw a drawing of this from my sketchbook if you saw the picture I used to advertise this episode of Geek Speaks Greek. I wanted her to have the appearance of kind of like an old movie star. If you've ever seen like from like the 1930s when movie stars were movie stars and they were the closest thing that in the United States we had to royalty, you would kind of see this sort of like archetype where there was like the woman who was... She was a little bit older, or more mature, I should say. Maybe she, like, has her hair down, like, pulled tight because she wears wigs and stuff. She's in, like, a gown. She wears, like, a big feather boa, and she's fabulous. She's kind of like a Cruella de Vil, where, like, you could see, like there's a trace of, like, glamour and beauty there, but it's kind of, like, hidden by her sinister intentions. Or maybe think, like, something like Maleficent, or this evil queen, or, like, any Disney villainess, I guess is what I'm getting at. So I gave her, she's half snake, half woman. Oh, I wanted to mention this. Actually, I'm going to change the page really quick because I want to draw some really quick. If you've ever heard the name Echidna, there is an animal called an echidna too. I'm going to come back to that drawing, don't worry. They're sometimes called spiny anteaters. And they got these little dumb faces, like anteaters. They got these big feet that look like moles with like huge claws on them. And then they look like hedgehogs or porcupines, covered with spines. I don't know what their back legs look like. Let's just not draw their back legs. They are these weird-looking creatures. And what's even weird about them, if I could get into some science stuff here, because I'm a big science nerd, they are mammals that lay eggs. They're called monotremes. Let's draw an egg. And crack open a little bit, and there's a little baby echidna sticking its head out. It's like, oh, hi, how are you? I'm born from an egg. Which is weird, right? There's like only a few species of monotremes left on the planet. There's like the echidnas. There's maybe a couple different types of echidnas. There's like the platypus, and that might be it. Like the monotreme is like this really weird kind of, you're not supposed to use terms like primitive, but like this kind of weird mix between like a reptile and a mammal. And when people discovered this, they named it Echidna after the snake monster because she was part woman and part reptile. And they're like, this is part mammal and part reptile. Like it looks like, if like a porcupine and a mole had a baby with like a little bit of anteater thrown in, but it lays eggs like a reptile. So There's your science note. So here's, again, we're drawing Echidna. There is her skull cap, which is actually just like kind of like the coloration of the top of her. A lot of reptiles have dorsal and ventral colors that are different, like darker on the top, lighter on the bottom. Like you've seen that like tons of times. I gave her very large eyes. Somewhat glamorous, honestly, but also kind of creepy because they're like snake eyes. Very small nose, because snakes don't really have, their nose is kind of part of their snout. And again, continuing that movie star look, amazing cheekbones. I talk a lot about cheekbones in this. I talk like how Zeus has really good cheekbones, and like Poseidon has even better cheekbones, and Hades has the best cheekbones of all. Nobody's cheekbones compared to Echidna's. And then she has lips that look like she's wearing lipstick, but they're just kind of always a dark green. I think she has ears. I don't remember if I drew her with ears. That would make sense. I mean, she's got to... maybe she doesn't have ears. I can't remember. And then she has kind of like this... Remember I mentioned like the boa wrapping around her neck? She has this kind of like collar or ruff around her neck. You guys know what I mean by a boa, like a big feathery thing, or like sometimes it'd be furs. You're like, look, it's me. I look gorgeous. And then she had this very sleek, sinuous body. There's her hands. She's a reptile, so she doesn't really have like a chest the way that mammals do, but it still is somewhat reminiscent of the way you might see like a very thin, very sleek and slender movie star. And her nails, you know, she's kind of, and the bottom half of her, which I didn't have room to draw here, just a snake. But like you have this kind of torso part, and you're like, okay, I mean, she's not going to win a beauty contest maybe, but she's kind of attractive in some way by like, you know, our standards of how we might judge beauty. As far as a monster goes, like she's not going to turn you to stone when you see her. She doesn't look like she's half like bull or something. But there's a transformation I intended with this. So, look at this. See those cheekbones? See the way it can come up right to the corner of her mouth? See her boa? She's part snake. Let's draw the same thing again. There's the cap. There's the big eyes. There's that little nose. Amazing cheekbones. There's those lips. Now, I don't know how much you know about snakes, but one of the things that snakes are very famous for, at least some species, they can disengage their jaw. When I was a kid, I had a book that had like this series of photos of like a little tiny like garter snake going up to a chicken egg and just kind of disconnecting its jaw and slowly swallowing this entire egg, which was way bigger than its head. My version of Echidna could do the same thing. So that cheekbone right there, her mouth splits open wide. And, of course, she had fearsome snake teeth underneath. Let's give her like a snake tongue, too. So this head splits open wide with this huge mouth. Could get even bigger. Like, already, she's looking pretty intense, right? Now, go back and look at this. Her boa, she's not actually wearing a boa. Guys, she's naked. She's a snake lady. She's not wearing anything. That's her actual neck. She curls it around her torso and rests it on top. So it looks like it's a human neck, but really, she's got this long, like scary neck. Same thing where it's dark on the top, light on the bottom. And then that sleek body, it gets super scary because she's like boa constrictor. Yeah, boa is literally come from boa constrictor because it looks like you're wearing a boa constrictor in your neck. That's exactly what it is. And then her fingers, those nice lithe fingers, they become scary talons. And her body's on this snake, so it's all coiled up. Just imagine that transformation. And I would love to do a scene someday. Maybe when we do an Olympians TV show, maybe in a sequel, something like that, where you have a moment where you see her and she's all charming and kind of acting like an old actress or a prima donna and just being like, oh, I'm so lonely here in my cave. I'm going to talk about her cave in a little bit. And just, I'm so happy to finally have a visitor. And she slowly gets more and more sinister and more like I mean, she's pretty sinister, and her eyes are like this huge, and they don't blink because she's a snake. You know, it's like, ugh. And all this stuff. And then what? Suddenly she just rears up and has huge fangs in her jaws, like, wah, and like her tail's coming out. She's scary. So this is really, she's one of my favorite designs, and she literally appears in 2 panels. And I'm just like, man. So I'm indulging myself today by doing this episode where I get to talk about her and trying to show off my drawings. I'm like, I think it's cool. I think it's cool. I think it's cool. All right. So I mentioned her cave. Mythologically speaking, when we hear about her, so Hesiod mentions that she lives in this cave. The ancient Greek people had various ideas of where she was. She's the mother of all monsters. She embodies rot, and she symbolizes kind of the unknown. And we've seen this a lot with other characters we've talked about, like the Titans or Nyx. She kind of lives on the edge of the civilized world. We don't really know where it is, and they had different ideas. And if they found a new land that looked kind of scary, they might be like, well, that's where she lives. And once they explored that and they discovered there wasn't a giant snake monster living in a cave in a swamp, they would find another land, like, that's where she lives. But one of the things that Hesiod says is she lives among the Aramesopoi. And you're like, who are they? This is a cool, weird little thing. They're like a race of people. They're a mythic race of people. They didn't really exist. But all these people, I mentioned them actually briefly in my episode on the Cyclopes. They had one eye. It was like this race of people that lived on the edge of civilization, way, way out there, that just had one eye each. Which is, it's like, okay, so she lives in, she's a person with 2 eyes is king in the land of the blind. Or, no, I said that wrong. It's man with 1 eye is king in the land of the blind. I guess person with 2 eyes is king in the land, or queen in the land of the people with 1 eye. I don't know. Guys, just don't listen to me anymore. But here is why I think that's really interesting. Because according to Hesiod, she's immortal. It makes sense. All of her kids are immortal. We talked about this. We were talking about with Cerberus. Like, can you kill Cerberus? And I'm of the opinion no. And because there's the other siblings. Sometimes you try to kill them and they can't. I think as the mother of all monsters, whose job is to be there to create these monsters, she's immortal. So that's what Hesiod says. But there exists a story where she's killed. And the person who kills her... Remember how I said I was very pleased that we got a drawing of Argos Panoptix? It's Argos Panoptix. I'm going to draw Argos really quickly. Argos is a giant. I did an episode on him, and if you remember that episode, I'm of the theory that he and Hera were maybe in love for a while. Which, he's kind of weird looking. But you know what? Zeus is really good looking and he's a terrible husband. So why wouldn't the guy who's maybe got eyes all over him, who's very faithful, maybe he is a better lover to Hera? Now, let's draw some more eyes here. Let's think about this. This is according to Apollodorus, by the way. According to Apollodorus, the man with 100 eyes in his head went to the land where people only have 1 eye and killed the lady who is the mother of all monsters. Now that's interesting to me. Not just because, hey, that's weird. 100 eyes versus 1 eyes. It's interesting to me that he went and killed Echidna at all. Because Echidna, as I mentioned, was married to Typhon, or, whatever. They had kids together. Like I said, I don't know if monsters get married. And Typhon, very famously, and I'll cover this in a future episode because I can't believe I haven't already, Typhon fought against the Greek gods, specifically Zeus, and he defeated Zeus. Typhon's powers are so immense. And he was armed with the sickle of Kronos. So he kind of got a fast one over on Zeus. He can't imprison Zeus, so he cut Zeus's tendons out. Leaves Zeus like this empty meat puppet on the ground. And then he seals him up in a cave. Well, he seals the tendons up in a cave, just leaves Zeus there. And it's in my story, it's in my book, Hermes, you get to see where Pan and Hermes work together and they trick him. They get the tendons back, they put him in Zeus, and Typhon is destroyed. Zeus blows up a bunch of his heads, and then he literally picks up an entire mountain and throws it on top of Typhon. In fact, Typhon's maybe still alive, because the mountain, it was various volcanoes. Sometimes it's Etna in Sicily, for instance. Like, they see the flames come out, they're like, oh, Typhon's burping, or something, right? But then Zeus leaves specific instructions. Nobody go after Echidna. The world needs monsters. Heroes need to measure themselves against monsters. If there's no more monsters, what will heroes do? And we know Zeus is already at this point getting concerned about heroes. So, like, if there's no monsters to fight, they might start fighting against me, and that's a pain in my tuchus. So, that's why he does the Trojan War, but that's another story, which you can watch in my other episodes on youtube.com. But he leaves specific instructions, like nobody leaves, Echidna is left alone. So there she is in her cave at the edge of the world, and her quote-unquote husband is dead, or at least trapped under a lot of rock and blown up to pieces and not feeling great. And then, for some reason, Argus goes and kills her. Now, nobody really knows why. I mean, okay, actually, in the story, if you read the Apollodorus, she eats people. I mean, look at her. She's gonna eat people. He's wandering through the area. He's like, what happened to all these people? Why are there, like, empty shoes? He doesn't really see empty shoes. But, like, people are like, yeah, there's this horrible monster snake lady up the hill, and she kind of eats people all the time. He goes there, and she's asleep. And he's like, I never sleep, so I don't have to worry about karma coming back and bite me in this one. And in the story, he kills her while she sleeps. And that's against Zeus's wishes. Maybe it wasn't against Hera's wishes. He is, after all, the faithful servant of Hera. And if that is what happened, if Hera told him to do this, that story doesn't survive to us. Even the story by Apollodorus is frustratingly sparse. There's not a lot of detail. There's a lot of space for us to kind of read into and guess stuff. And I actually kind of pick up a lot on this in my book, Hermes. So in Hermes, if you read that book, I have to see if Hermes is right here, because I'm going to want to show you some pictures. There's Argus on the cover. The framing device of Hermes is there is a storyteller, and he's wandering down the roads, and he comes across this farm. There's a weird cow there that's wearing earrings, which is like weird for a cow. And he sees Argos Panoptix with the 100 eyes. And this storyteller isn't super surprised by this. He deals with it better than probably you were. You'd be like, oh, that's disgusting. But he's just like, cool, you know what? I'll trade you some stories. And if you like the stories, you let me and my dog stay here. And Argus is like, cool, let's do it. And they trade a bunch of stories and stuff. And it turns out, oh, look, here's the picture I drew of her. This is one of the only times we get to see Echidna. And we tell all these, and the storyteller's telling all these stories. And he's telling specifically this portion of the book, the storyteller is mentioning Echidna because he's talking about Typhon. And there's a little bit of a hint. The storyteller's kind of like, I wonder if that name means anything to you, Echidna. And you kind of like, you see his eye and he looks at Argus, and Argus is kind of like, And you're like, what's going on? Why is he pointing that out specifically? And then we get to later. Here's the other only picture I ever drew of her. That's her in her snake monster form. Spooky. And Argus is like, yeah, I get it. You're the god Hermes in disguise. And, like, you're mad at me because I killed her. This is why you mentioned that. Or he doesn't say that yet. And he's wrong. I'm just going to tell you that. Spoilers. He's not. Like, I'm just a bit of spoilers. But if you know what happens to Argus, you could go watch that episode on YouTube. But Hermes is there, actually. And he is there just not in the way you might expect. He is there to free Io the cow from the faithful gaze of Argus. And he puts Argus to sleep. But he does end up killing Argus. The faithful servant of Hera cuts his head off. And it's not super duper blatant in my book, but you're like, why does he do it? He doesn't need to. He got what he needed. And it's not like Hermes to be bloodthirsty, unless you're a turtle. He kills you for a turtle. The reason I have him do it is because Zeus left specific instructions. The world needs monsters. And Argus, for reasons unknown, killed the mother of all monsters. So Zeus demanded a punishment. And he sent his son, one of his most faithful servants, Hermes, to kill poor Argus. And he does. And that's maybe not the real reason Zeus kills him. Maybe Zeus was like found some love letters between Argus and Hera. Maybe he didn't like the way that Argus stared at Hera with his 50 eyes. Maybe he didn't like the way that Hera had this like big giant guy going doing errands all the time. But it's kind of in there, and I just think it's really fascinating, this whole idea that like this creature who was protected by Zeus was killed by the faithful servant of his wife, who he's often in disagreement with, and then his son, who's, I would say Hermes is the most faithful servant of Zeus, goes and kills him instead. Or not instead, in turn. I don't know. So, I think that's all I had to say about Echidna. Like I said, this is a sparse one. I just really, I enjoy her design. I think she's a cool monster. If I were ever to write stories continuing the saga of the Olympians, people always ask, like, what did you do, the Titans? I'm like, yeah, you do more stories about the Titans. I talked before how doing stuff about Nyx would be really cool, but I think it would be really fascinating to do stories about her. Like, what would her, like, so we know a bunch of her kids. They're all over the place. What would her kids look like if she was still alive having kids today? Maybe she is having kids. Maybe someone we know now is the son or daughter of Echidna. I could think of a few people I would suspect. So that was my episode, my lecture on her. CVQ Lam is asking for more sketchbooks. I unfortunately don't have my sketchbook near me. I can't show you that stuff now, but I will do more sketchbook episodes. What I'll probably do one of these days is just an episode where it's all sketchbooks, and I'll set up the camera different so it's just looking over my head and I'll just flip through pages and we can talk about stuff. Because I think that'd be more fun than me just kind of holding up pages and stuff. We'll do it like proper that way. Is she gone forever, or does Zeus bring her back? Anika asks. That's a great question. Like, first off, according to Hesiod, she doesn't die. So, depends. But Hesiod has some... This is one of the few instances where I feel like Hesiod has some kind of ideas that don't jive with the rest of mythology. Like, some of his descriptions of the monsters are weird and things. And then the idea that, like... So, it's only Apollodorus has her dying. I feel like Zeus doesn't tend to really bring anybody back to life unless it's something that's like in the case of Tantalus, he brings back Tantalus' son Pelops because that was which we mentioned that drawing up front because that was such an affront to the gods. Like Tantalus killed his son and served him as stew to the gods. Zeus brought him back to life in that instance to help the other gods. I don't know that he'd bring back Echidna. I feel like what might have happened more. So I didn't mention this. There's a couple of weird texts here and there where they describe other children of Echidna and Typhon that don't have names even, just creepy monsters. Maybe she has like a daughter. Maybe she survived. Maybe she's like a weird creature that can kind of reclone herself. I don't know. It's kind of cool. It's a cool thing to think about for sure. Let's see. Know how Typhon cuts out Zeus's tendons? He obviously didn't cut out his mouth tendons because he's able to talk to Hermes. That's a good point. All right, silly question. Does a mouth have tendons or is that all just muscle tissue? Like I know tendons kind of like, Are tendons part of the muscles that attach directly to the bone or are tendons separately? Like, I can see my tendons in my fingers. I need to do some research on anatomy. Yeah, whatever the point that let Zeus move his mouth, that part was not cut. Definitely. But like his arms, his legs, that was the stuff that was definitely cut. I think Zeus and Methys could do like Leto and stay in Olympus, I guess. Oh, I didn't see what that's in reference to. I'll have to go back up and see. Oh, can you repeat the rest of that question? I don't see the rest of it. All right. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, CVQ Lama, I did come late, so how did she die? According to Apollodorus, Echidna is killed by Argos Panoptix, who sneaks into her cave while she is asleep and kills her. I'm not really sure how. I'm imagining, given that she has the big long neck, cuts off her head. But, I'm just throwing that out there. Let's see what else we got. What would your Olympians TV series be about? Different smaller myths, or would it mimic the books? Well, that's a great question. I would think there's been different ideas of how to do Olympians TV series, and first it would be like just do the books. But I think one of the things I've learned from doing something like this, where I get to talk to you and just talk about like this is a character who literally appeared in 2 panels of my book, and I just showed them to you. That's her entire experience in Olympians, and I was able to do an entire episode talking about her. I feel like if I had my carte blanche, my blank page to do an Olympians TV show, anything I'd want, I would just go into crazy detail on anything. It would be kind of like Game of Thrones, but I would actually hopefully keep track of the central plot and not just go off into weird spirals and never finish the book series or the TV series, as it may be. Okay, Divine Megan, your question was about Medicine Zeus, but I don't know what the first part of it was. And Ranka asks, what is the blood of monsters like? Depends on the monster. Sometimes the blood is just straight up normal blood. We'll get descriptions of that. Sometimes, like in the case of Python, who is often conflated, as I mentioned up front, with Echidna, the blood is described as like black oozing slime that's corrosive. So it's like disgusting. Like you cut open Python, and presumably, I'm actually going to guess Echidna too, since she's so closely related with rot and slime. I feel like it would just kind of like spill out and just be like burning the ground. It would stink and things. Some monsters might even have ichor, like the gods, where it's like golden. It depends where you draw that line. Oh my gosh, there was a few other things I want to mention about Echidna, speaking of all the stuff about monsters that I didn't get to say. So, remember how I said she is the daughter of Phorcys and Ceto? She has some very interesting siblings in that case, too. According to Hesiod, remember I said Hesiod doesn't say Ladon, the dragon of the Hesperides, is one of her kids? According to Hesiod, it's one of her siblings. And he kind of groups the monsters, like all her kids all her kids have multiple heads because of Typhon. But then the kids that are like snake-like, he thinks are all her siblings. So like Ladon is one of her siblings. He also has a couple really weird ones. You remember the Graiae? Which would be probably a good one to do an episode on. They're the 3 witches that help Perseus find Medusa, and they only have 1 eye and 1 tooth that they pass back and forth between all of them. They're actually considered, by Hesiod at least, to be her sisters. And this is, again, they are the children of Phorcys and Ceto, which is weird. It's like, why does a whale monster and a sea monster have kids that are like witches with no eyes? Who knows? And then even stranger, according to Hesiod, and this is what I'm saying, Hesiod has some weird ideas. He places Medusa and the Gorgons as her sister. In fact, if you read Hesiod's Theogony, the entire idea of Medusa being a mortal woman who is cursed by Athena, that doesn't exist. In Hesiod, they were born Gorgons. There's Euryale and Stheno, who are both immortal, and then they have the tragedy of their sister Medusa, who is born immortal, but she's still like a snake monster. And also, Poseidon's still like, hey, how you doing? And so, like, he's with her, even though, and like, this is not, she's being punished. He just likes snake monsters, which, why not? Go for it. And they're very much, like, there's no punishment, there's no Poseidon taking her by force, there's none of that stuff. They are together. She eventually gets killed, and when she's killed, that's when Poseidon's children are born from her body. Pegasus, and in Hesiod, Chrysaor, who's like not really personified in myth, so I didn't really put that in my book, which is like kind of crazy. Now, there's one other sister of hers I didn't mention because I was getting into this with the whole Typhon connection. I mean, the whole Poseidon connection. Do you guys remember the name Teusa or Theusa? You might sound familiar. She's a character that we see for in one panel of Poseidon. And she is a sea serpent woman. Top half, beautiful woman. Bottom half, big, long snake, sea snake. Sounds very familiar, right? Poseidon is with her, and she is the mother of Polyphemus, the Cyclops. So that's kind of some interesting stuff, right? Like all these sea serpent ladies and things. And Poseidon definitely seems to have at least according to Hesiod, definitely seems to like ladies who are at least part snake. So I forgot to mention that stuff up front because it's kind of on the side, but like I thought I should throw that in. Phoebus Apollo 98 asks, which children of Echidna are the most powerful? Well, that's an interesting question. I don't feel like there's anyone that really jumps out as being like so much more powerful than the rest. Although, okay, I'm gonna put even though the Nemean lion is like almost impregnable, he does ultimately die, so that puts him at a lower thing. And Orthos, come on, you got 2 heads. So you got 2 heads. You're dead too. Cerberus seems to be immortal, so I put them up pretty high. He's also scary enough to like keep watch over the entirety of the underworld. The Sphinx. Actually, the Sphinx isn't more. The Sphinx, in some versions of the story, throws herself when her riddle's guessed, throws herself off a cliff, so she's not immortal either. Ladon, the dragon of the Hesperides, is immortal and doesn't sleep. Sounds like Argos Panoptix, is where he's also not immortal. Who else do we have as kids? I'm forgetting someone. Oh, the Hydra. The Hydra, the central head's not immortal. It is immortal. So I'm going to put Ladon... Oh, and the Chimera also dies. That's another kid. Okay, I'm going to say Cerberus and Hydra. Cerberus is the most powerful, I'll say. Right? Because, like, Cerberus doesn't get his heads cut off and buried under a rock like certain Hydra we can mention. So I'm going to put Cerberus at the top. Oh, this is actually a good... I'm going to... Hey... CVQ Llama, could you write the text in your comics in not cursive? I want to read them, but I cannot read cursive. That's actually a good tip in general for people who do comics. It's one of the things that people overlook the most, and it's why I do my lettering in type, because my handwriting's not great. Like, this is like what... Oh, I was supposed to show you my notes, but they're going to fall. My handwriting is terrible. And so one of the things I do is I write. One of the things you want your comics is to be read really easily. So a good way to do that is just to spend either time writing them out, like, in block letters. That's why you see a lot of comics are written in caps. Or if you can, type them, because that would make it a lot easier. This is so cute. Everyone's just saying hi to each other here. And let's see... If you were a Greek monster, which do you think you would be? Not who you'd want to be. What monster do you think you'd actually be? Oh, man. Okay. That's a great question, because a lot of times you ask people and they choose like what they think is the coolest monster. And like, I'm not the coolest guy. I wouldn't be the coolest monster either. Like, it would be like, who would be pretty, like, it would actually, that's hard. I mean, okay, like being Typhon would be the coolest because you're kind of all like unstoppable for the most part, even though he does get defeated. Who is the best monster? Man, I mean, I know who I'd be. I mean, I'd be a satyr. Do they count as monsters? Probably, but I'd just be a satyr. I'd be this little chubby satyr going, woohoo, smacking my belly, playing my flute, running around, getting drunk on wine with Dionysus. I'd probably be that. I mean, when I was a kid, I really loved the Minotaur, but now I'm kind of under the impression the Minotaur probably was not very smart. He was like, he was somewhere intelligent between a cow and a person. That's not great. You're probably not dealing pretty badly there. Medusa is just a big victim. I wouldn't want to be her. She's got a hard life. Wouldn't want to be Polyphemus because I want to have my one eye not be poked out. Being one of the Cyclopes might be cool. Argus, Brontus, or Steropus, the immortal ones, but then they don't have... What's the one eye? You have no depth perception. You're always running into things. Echidna is pretty awesome, honestly. If I could get the assurance I'm not going to be murdered while I sleep by Argos Panoptix, maybe Echidna. And I'm not even thinking, like, I'm not really thinking outside the box here. Like, a centaur might be pretty neat. Or, like, some sort of sea creature. Like, maybe I could be Cetus. Like, just this giant armored whale monster. But then I have to eat people. I don't know. I'm going to stick with the satyr. It's the easiest. And let's see. Do you think the monsters think regular people are monsters? Oh, Michelle, that's a great question. Yeah, I think sometimes they do. I think especially in the case of Medusa, if we go for the version, not the Hesiodic version, but the version where she's like the victim, yeah, the entire world must be full of monsters to her. Also, like in the idea, like, if you take up Hesiod, where her sisters have also been cursed to be with her, like, just think, first off, that probably gives you a sense of normalcy, right? The only people you really see who don't get turned to stone are your two monstrous sisters. So your kind of perceptions of the world around you really probably start shifting, where, like, you see a person, looks at me, you're like, ugh, the heck's wrong with that guy's face? And then, like, everybody shows up there is like, sort of like, I'm going to cut your head. And then they turn to stone. Like, yeah, that makes total sense to me. They think other people are monsters. I also think the Minotaur probably was, like, really disturbed by other people trying. A lot of these monsters, man, when you really look at it, they're just kind of minding their own business and people are coming trying to kill them. So, yeah, the people are definitely the monsters in that case. And the ones, I would say also, the monsters who come from, like, a species, like the Aramesopoi I just mentioned here, the entire tribe of one-eyed kind of cyclopean people, yeah, they must have been like, oh my god, what's wrong with you? Why do you have so many eyes when they saw a person? Because that's what they're used to. And, like, they would have been conditioned, like, you know, just through, like, breeding and living, like, they would have found that attractive. And, like, you see 2 eyes, and it'd be like, if we saw someone with 4 eyes and not, like, glasses, like, literally, I'd, like, extra eyes on my head, it'd be like, bleh. Somebody wrote, Little Serial Draws wrote, an Asgardian mini-comic would be so cool. Well, I mean, you know I'm doing the Asgardian series, right? I'm going to be writing and drawing 4 whole full-length comics of Asgardians. And I wouldn't be surprised if at some point during the course of working Asgardians, there's a little extra story somewhere here or there, like I sneak in at the side, like I did with this story that you can get when you go to my website, George O'Connor Books, where you can go and you get the story of King Midas and his ears, for instance. Sometimes there's a little side, or like the stories of Hermes that came up in Fable Comics. NX Swift asks, what's the hairiest monster? Me. I'm the hairiest monster. Look at that. I'm furry. I'm sweating because I'm so hairy. It's me, and then after me is Bigfoot. I know he's not a Greek monster, but the dude's hairy. Let's see. Do you think the Minotaur actually eat people because bulls don't eat people? No, I actually talk about that in the Minotaur episode. I actually am under the impression he did not eat people because people, for the most part, don't eat people. We're looking at you. There's a couple weirdos over the years who have, and bulls certainly don't eat people. So I think the Minotaur didn't. If the Minotaur did kill people, it was probably because he was like, you know, he was huge. He was like a man the size and strength of a bull who was about half as smart as a normal human because he was mixed with a cow. So he'd be like, look at the people, play with them, and they'd smush them. And I've mentioned there's the really great short story that I referenced several times in my retelling the Minotaur, The House of Asterion, where he doesn't eat the people. He accidentally kills them or kills them on purpose. It's a little vague. And he leaves their bodies at different spots and in different positions in the labyrinth. So he has some sense of where he's going. Because remember, even the Minotaur is lost. And actually, because he's like half as smart as a person, it's probably easier for him to get lost. So he goes like, okay, this is the room where the dead body's standing on his head. And this is the room where I pulled the legs off the dead body and stuck them in his ears. Like, that's his way of finding his way around. Sorry, Dad, I don't need people. I'm glad to hear that. When you do a panel that goes over both pages, do you use 2 papers or 1? So this is a reference to if I'm drawing something and there is like a... let me see if there's any examples of that in Hermes, because it's the one I have in front of me. Where, like, basically, there'll be like a double-page spread. Like this. This is the shot of Typhon that I drew in Hermes. And, yeah, he was asking, do I use 2 pieces of paper? Yes. I taped 2 pieces of paper together. It's very large. It's a little bit hard to scan this. I have an enormous scanner, but it could still only scan like 1 piece of paper at a time. So I have to kind of knit these together. If you want to be a crazy person, you could take a look at all my double-page spreads and see if you can see the spot where they knit together, because sometimes they're off by like a pixel. Like, literally like a pixel. I spend like so long trying to make them match up perfect, but they don't always match up perfect. You could look very carefully and see it, but you would have to be a crazy person to do that, seriously. Yeah, but I do use 2 papers for that. And I see we're just about here, and we're just about done. Ranka asks me, draw Echidna and Argos fighting, all scales and eyeballs. Yeah, that would be pretty... I feel, here's the thing. I feel like Echidna, you don't really get a sense of this. She's huge. She's gotta be. She gave birth to, like, the Chimera and the Sphinx and Cerberus. I feel like if she hadn't been asleep, she would have just totally eaten Argus. So I don't think it would be as exciting a fight maybe as we think it would have been. Pardon me. But, I don't know. That'd be a cool thing for somebody to send in as they're drawing. Hint, hint. In fact... let's start wrapping this up because I just got the countdown. Whoop, wrong way. If you have any questions or you want to send an artwork, please send it to my email at georgeoconnorbooks@gmail.com. And you can always catch other episodes at, whoops, man, what's going on with me today? At my youtube.com/user, George Olympians. And thank you all so much. Not really sure what I'm doing Monday. If you have any suggestions, maybe write in. I honestly might continue doing monsters because I'm having a lot of fun doing monsters. Like, like Divine Megan asks, can I do a Typhon? Maybe I'll do Typhon. We are sure I haven't done Typhon, right? Because it would be fun to do Typhon. It's going to be hard to draw him because he's got the 100 heads. I'm not going to draw all the 100 heads. I'm not crazy. But maybe I'll do Typhon. I don't know. Check back soon. See you all Monday. We're probably going to do Typhon. All right. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.